Hey, everybody. We are back this week, picking up right where we left off last week on our journey from upgrading a decade old Rails 3.2 Ruby 2.0 application to Rails 7, Ruby 3. And last time we made it all the way through to Rails 4 and Ruby 2.2, dealing with a lot of legacy um, build issues, compile issues, gem issues, just because so much of this stuff was so dang old. If you remember, I couldn't even run that version of Ruby on my computer, so I was joined by Thoughtbot developer Sarah Jackson to run it on her Intel-based computer. Sarah's going to be joining us again in about an hour. In the meantime, I'm going to be joined by a few other Thoughtbot people along the way. And I appreciate everyone watching and the great comments and feedback along the way. It's been really fantastic. And I also realized afterwards that last time I was talking into the wrong side of my microphone for the entire stream and no one said anything. So I really appreciate should be fixed this time. And the other thing is we were streaming at 720p last time, and now we're at 1040. So it should be a lot easier to see my screen. And speaking of my screen, I'm going to bring that up now. And we're going to pick up right where we left off. Before we do that, you might notice setup's a little bit different. We're using my computer this time. And I've since last week dealt with the problem of not being able to run Ruby 2.0 or 2.2 on a ARM Mac. And the way that I've done that is that QEMU supports x86 or AMD 64 fully emulated. And so that's what I have now. I have a Ubuntu box running fully emulated on my Intel computer. It's sort of it is slower, which you'll see when we run the specs and compile gems, but it's workable, it's usable. And so I'm now using Visual Studio Code connected via SSH to that box. So you can see the prompt is on the Ubuntu box. Really interesting. I did it in the back, poked at it in the background while doing other work since last week, hoping that I could get everything running locally, and was excited to get it working. So yeah, and Aaron asked what software we're using to stream. We are using a service called StreamYard, which is gives us a little studio and allows you to stream to multiple different providers. So if you remember last week, we finished up. We had just reached. We had successfully upgraded Ruby to 2.2. And we had gotten to Rails 4.0, but our specs were failing because we were getting an error in the specs for clearance. And we did some quick poking around, and I quickly came to the conclusion we actually need to look at the clearance documentation. Something changed in clearance. We went from clearance 0.17 to 1.7 in the jump to Rails 4. And that's a big jump, and something clearly changed. This is live. I have not looked into it or prepped since last week. This is actual real work that I'm doing. So come along for the journey with me. And oh, wow, Aaron, it turns out you work for StreamYard's parent company. That's cool. It's pretty cool software, and it's working well for us. So here are the clearance docs. I did bring up the docs in advance, so I didn't have to poke around it and search for them. We, on the clearance wiki, have notes on upgrading to clearance 1.0. And I think that that's probably what's going to serve us. So I brought up the notes, but I didn't look at them. So let's look at them in advance. I didn't look at them in advance. Let's look at them together. So the module to include in your application controller is clearance controller, not clearance authentication. So let's go to application controller. Clearance controller, not clearance authentication. And we are including clearance authentication. So let's change that to clearance controller. The return to path can no longer be provided by request parameters. If you use this functionality, you should instead add a before filter that sets session return to. You can grep your views for return to determine if you're affected by this change. So I'm just going to look for return to. Okay, so we're not using return to, although we are using redirect back or, and I'm just going to search for that. And we're not calling that directly in any of our code according to that quick search. So that leads me to believe, let's check this third bullet point, the default encryption strategy is bcrypt, not SHA-1. That's not going to affect us in this application because it's not actually in production anywhere. So changing the encryption strategy is totally fine. So let's see if changing from clearance authentication to clearance controller actually fixed the views. I'm getting pinged in Slack, so I'm going to cancel that out. So you can see this is running on that x86 emulated system. So it's a little bit slower, but it's totally workable, which I was super excited to find out. The spec passed. That's great. So let's actually try running all of the specs and see if everything passes. So thanks for being here, everyone. Sarah's going to join me at the top of the hour, and we're picking back up where we left off last week, just upgrading clearance and seeing if the specs run now. If you have questions, I'm monitoring the chat, and I've got some people helping as well. So feel free to drop any questions or comments. It was super helpful last week. So I was definitely able to, or I was making some errors. We were making some errors, and it was good to get some comments pointing out different approaches or things we had missed. So it looks like we are getting some failures here. Okay, email is invalid. Expected email, invalid email is not a valid email. Got email is invalid. It looks like, so my initial reaction is this looks to me like some stuff maybe changed with Rails validation error messages from 3.2 to 4.0. And so cool. So let's that one looks like an easy thing to fix. So email's invalid. So this is email enumerable spec. So it's calling validate each on each of these things. So this is interesting because it's calling validate each and it's giving it the record. The error message we were expecting to get back is a concatenated string. 1 is not a valid email, 2 is not a valid email. That's what we were expecting. And now we're just getting a generic error. Emails is invalid. Emails is invalid. Seems less than optimal, and I'm wondering what's going on there. I'm just looking up validate each. If you don't, if you haven't seen this program before, it's one I use a lot. It's called Dash. But I'm realizing this is going to be the current Rails docs. But let's see if it helps us at all. So validate each record attribute value. Okay. So this is actually, I'm realizing as I look at this, this is calling email validator, I bet. And so here's the actual implementation of that. And we can see it's supposed to say, it's supposed to add the error, whatever you pass in is not a valid email. So we're not getting that. Not getting that. So I'm going to just honestly do what I would normally do here. I'm going to I'm just going to print out this value. I'm going to go to the email validator spec that's also failing. I want to see whether it's actually calling it as we expect there. And I'm wondering whether something with full error messages changed from Rails 3.2 to Rails. But you can see it didn't print out anything about, it didn't print out what I put there. So that means this validator isn't being called at all. Email validator. Okay. So yeah. Okay, so email validator. We are attempting to call, oh, that's the wrong spec. We're attempting to call email validator.new.validate with the record. And we're expecting that that calls validate each. And that is not happening because the put statement that I put there didn't print out what we're expecting. So this definitely smells to me like something changed with Rails validations from 3.2 to 4.0, and we are writing a custom validation for that. So let's go over to the Rails docs for Rails 4.0. And fortunately, they're still online. And we'll be able to look up the validations.
Hello, Chad.
Hey.
Thought I'd pop in while you're looking.
Thanks for joining me, Sally. Sally, while I read this page, why don't you introduce yourself to folks?
Yeah, sounds good. I am Sally Ladrick. I'm Sales Enablement and Marketing Manager here at ThoughtBot, which means that most of the stuff I have no idea what's going on, but that's okay because it's still fun to watch. But if you were on the stream last week, I was actually kind of in the background whispering in Chad and Sarah's ears. And yeah, I'm just here to hang out and maybe learn something. I don't know. Yeah, super excited to be here.
Thanks for joining me. This is uh, good. So what I'm doing now is I'm looking at the Rails validation docs, and what I want to find is uh, custom validation. So custom validators, and here they are. Custom validators are classes that extend active model validator. So here's, okay, each validator. Okay. These classes must implement a validate method, which takes a record as an argument and performs the validation on it. The custom validator is called with the validates with method. That's what it's called with from the model that's using it. So you can see email validator. Wow, look at this example code. It's basically exactly the method that we wrote here, which is interesting. I wasn't expecting to see that. I wonder whether
Do
we
you
took
think
it
they
or they
stole it
took
from
it.
us? I was just gonna
It's
ask
also
that.
possible that we contributed to this guy. I have no idea. It was long enough ago. We'd have to check, but oh, that's funny. Okay, so this matches here, and it's validate each.
So I don't know if you mentioned it at the beginning or not, but would it be helpful to recap what it is that we're upgrading?
I did. But we're upgrading. Well, we started off upgrading the clearance library, and we actually pretty quickly resolved the error and did it. And that spec with the clearance failure was green. So we're past that point now, and we ran our specs, and we got a bunch of other failures around these validation error messages, and now we're digging into why that is. And it looks like the validator is not being called like we expect.
But this is our example app, right, from Ruby Science?
Oh yeah. So what we're upgrading is the example app from our book Ruby Science, which is about Rails and Ruby best practices and how to build reliable, maintainable, well-written applications. We're in the process of updating that book. And so I'm updating the example application, which is Ruby 2.0 and Rails 3.2. We are now at Ruby 2.2 and Rails 4.0. And the other point that we hammered home last time, and I didn't mention this time, is it's really easy when you're doing these significant Rails upgrades to be tempted to make a big leap and say, this is so old, let's jump all the way up to a more modern version of Rails. But with any of these upgrades, it's really possible to get yourself into a scenario where you break so much at once that you get yourself into a position where you don't know what broke what, and it's really hard to get out of it. So general approach is upgrade Ruby, upgrade Rails, upgrade Ruby, upgrade Rails, incrementally along the way. And that's what we're doing now. And so we've just bumped Rails to Rails 4.0, and we're fixing errors in our specs that come up. Is that a good recap?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, good.
I did hear some of the recap at the beginning, but I was like, did he talk about what the actual
No, I never said what
application
the actual application
is?
Okay. Um, okay, so record attribute value. One of the problems with the Rails guides is that they don't typically show you test code. And so let me just look at where this is actually used. It's actually used here. I'm just going to survey inviter spec. I'm going to look at the spec for this. I want to see whether there's another spec for the actual usage of this. Invalid email, invalid params. So here is a spec which I just want to see whether this one is also failing. If it's passing, that means that it might be just our spec code that's wrong and not the actual implementation of the validators. So that's why I'm running that. Okay, so the actual usage of this validator is correct, and that spec is passing, and it's the validator is working correctly. So that's good. It means that that's working, and it helps us narrow it down because that means that the problem is in the spec, not the actual code. And so that leads me to believe that this is now the wrong way to manually call a validator. But I don't know the right way to manually call a validator.
Do you use a cell phone? Do you send a smoke signal? Maybe there's a special way.
Maybe there is. Okay, I'm just gonna r spec test custom validator. Let's see.
Google is always your friend, right?
Yeah.
By the way, if anyone has ideas as we're learning and troubleshooting, feel free to put them in the comments. It's always more fun when our friends play along.
Okay, so what this example spec is doing is it's calling it a little bit differently. It is including it in a test model, and then testing it on that model. So they're testing the side effects. Just gonna, out of curiosity, I'm gonna print the full errors instead of doing checking full messages. I just want to see if the information that we want is there and that's what changed in the implementation of Rails, or whether the spec code changed in the version of Rails. Okay, so okay, I don't. the error itself is invalid. Looks like it's not returning the message that we want at all, and that our validator is putting there. And that's interesting to me. That would also, if you remember the survey inviter spec, there is a validation, and so it is failing the validation, but this spec's not checking the error message, where our other spec is checking for the specific error message. So that leads me to believe that maybe we're putting the so errors.add is our example. That's a custom method, record.errors attribute. So you see how they're adding in this example documentation, they are saying record.errors, and they're assigning it to, they're adding it to this here. That is very different. I didn't notice that. That is very different than what we're doing right there. I didn't notice that different. So let's just bring this over and let's compare them, and then we'll give it a try, and we'll so this is the two different versions of this. This is the one I'm commenting now is our original one. This is the one that the Rails docs say to do. So let's run that spec now and see.
So while that's running, I had a question
Yeah.
about what your favorite and least favorite part of doing an upgrade like this is.
I think actually this is probably my least favorite part, what's happening right now, where something has changed in between two different versions of something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's difficult to know what it is, and it's difficult to find it out. And you don't know, like in this case, you don't know whether it's the spec, it's the code, it's an actual change. You know, it's difficult to know. And honestly, you know, it's easier to do when it's a more recent change. Now we're sort of going back in time, you know, 7 years, and trying to debug things that changed a long time ago. So it can be difficult to do. So yeah, I think this is probably my least favorite part. That being said, I still enjoy it. It's sort of fun. It's fun sleuthing. Okay, so that ran. It did not fix the problem. In fact, it is exactly the same now as it was before. So that is not the problem. So I'm going to put back what we had before.
So is your favorite part when it's done?
Maybe.
I think the other thing that I'm hearing is that if you're going to do these upgrades, do them as they come out versus waiting 7 years.
Yeah, unless you're looking for good live streaming content, I highly recommend staying as up to date with everything as possible. Um, and that's what I plan on doing going forward with this application. Okay, so in this case, the custom validator class must implement a validate each method, which takes three arguments: record, attribute, and value, which correspond to the instance, the attribute to be validated, and the value of the attribute to the past in the past instance. So it is doing. I'm going to go back. If you remember when I printed out this, there was the invalid email is on the, so to so what we were doing was upgrading from Rails 3 to Rails 2. I want to look to see whether there was a change with full messages or errors. Oh, errors is a totally bad thing to search for.
Errors all over the place.
Okay.
Tom had a suggestion. Said,
Mm-hmm.
could that spec be tripping some other validation?
It's a good question, Tom. And hey, Tom, nice to see you. It's a good question. The reason why I don't think that that's the case is because we are calling the email validator right there. We're not going through but what we're doing is example class. And we're building a completely from scratch class here with, and you can see there's no validations on that class. But that's a good thought, and it's good to make sure that that's not the case and double check. So what I was going to do was I don't know if this will print something, but I'm going to try it and see. Yeah, okay, there's no. I think it is on the oh, sorry, I got distracted. So active model Rails 4's change how errors attach with the active model validation's confirmation validator. And then this change. So neither of these changes are there. Let's just check the active record section. Okay, I'm not seeing anything related there, so that's fine. Let's go back to our Google search here. Just see whether this. Yeah, once again, it's so I'm tempted to we're doing so we have our class down here, and if we were to put validates email, presence true, email true. I probably want to get rid of this. So that should be using that email validator now on the record. And so I'm just going to temporarily comment this out, and I'm going to call record.valid instead. And we'll see what that does. It should now be passing through the record instead of manually calling that. Okay, so exactly the same failure. I should have added that print statement just to make sure that it's exactly the same. So it really seems like what we're doing is setting the wrong we're just setting the message the wrong way. It's just getting is invalid, which honestly is, where is that coming from? Is that just coming from Rails? So that string doesn't appear at all in our application. So that means it's coming from Rails. That's interesting. The default error message for validates associated is invalid. The default error message is invalid. The default error message is invalid. So the validator is registering the failure correctly, but the message that we're putting on is not coming through. The default message is coming through. So at this point in every problem, we have a decision to make. Do we spend more time banging our head against this particular error, or do we change our focus to look at a different error for a little bit? And sometimes that is worth it because you're just not able to come to a solution. Um,
Sarah will also be on in about 20 minutes. So you'll have another developer brain to throw at the problem.
yeah. Okay, so I'm going to put back this because that was absolutely no change, didn't result in any change at all. And I think I'm going to run specs again and pick out a different error to see whether I can make headway with that one instead. And we'll come back to that other error later. It's probably not going to go away. It seems like a legit difference in the way that this error message should be carried forward. Why do we have so much green here? Oh, okay. I got worried. It's funny because the spec order is randomized. Previously, the failures were spread more out. I was about to be very confused about why we didn't have any failures. Okay, so let's take a look at what okay, so this seems to be a completely different failure. This seems to be a different failure. As well. Okay, we've got these can't convert nil into float errors, forbidden attributes failure, then those validation ones. Okay, so we've got this forbidden attributes error a few different times. I think let's pick that one out next. Let's look at the spec. So what this is a feature spec. It's using Capybara to drive the features, and it is trying to fill in the form for this application has questions. It's a survey builder, so we're building a survey here. It's trying to add or the survey has a question on it, and the spec is trying to change the type. It's getting forbidden attributes error. So what that means is it's happening in the model and build submittable, and it's merging in that's interesting to me because I didn't think we were using this anymore. So let's go to the question model. We're already there. Yeah, okay, so include active model forbidden attributes protection. So if you remember, Rails used to do attribute protection from mass assignment using forbidden attributes. So you would define which things were not mass assignable at the model level. And then Rails changed to using it at the controller level. And so what it looks like we're doing here is we're including forbidden attributes protection, which by default should protect all attributes from mass assignment. I'm just going to look at the controller. So the controller is using a submittable attributes method to get the submittable attributes, but it's not using the new syntax to permit things. So then our spec, I think what's happening here is our spec is attempting to do mass assignment. And so it's throwing the forbidden attributes error because it's attempting to do mass assignment on things which it's not allowed to do anymore. So I'm just going to validate that assumption by, I believe that, here, let's close this. I believe that if I remove that line from this, then it's gonna, then the spec is gonna pass. I could be wrong, but that's my my thinking.
We'll see if your thinking is correct.
Okay, so got the exact same error. Okay, so that means that my assumption, to me, that means my assumption was not correct. I'm gonna go over to the Rails upgrade guide again. And I want to look at okay. So I'm just looking to see if I can find some, yeah, here we go. Okay. So it's interesting because it says that this was added in 4.0. If I
There was
remember,
a comment. Is the app using Spring? Second time you make a change and it doesn't seem to be reflected in the test.
that's a good question. How do we check whether forget how to check whether was Spring even in Rails 4? Yeah, that I don't even think it's not in the gem file. Pretty sure that Rails 4 didn't include a bootloader or anything like Spring. I think my specs, the change that I made actually did not change anything. But let's just, how can we verify this? Steps question. Okay, so where we're working with is right here. So I'm just going to add a raise. And that should raise now, assuming that our changes are being reloaded from between spec runs, which is what Fabio is saying. Okay, so we got a runtime error this time instead. So that is reloading the model every time. Okay, so let's go back to our okay. So what changed? What I'm reading here. This is the Rails 4.0 upgrade guide. This this forbidden attributes protection. When non-permitted attributes are passed, what's failing is where we are providing a whole big hash of things. And this is happening in the controller. So I don't want to just take the entire hash. So we need to, in theory, we need to permit some things. See, this controller is doing that here. But the type controller, remember, was not permitting anything. So the questions controller is, but the type controller is not. And the reason why it's not is because it is just calling switch to with type there. So just to see whether this works, I'm going to take these attributes we're permitting here. And I'm going to permit them in this controller as well. And while that runs, I'm going to look at the form. So the form has a type field and then a submittable type form. So what were we changing the type to? Okay, so that made the spec green by permitting the parameters. So that is the problem. The problem is we had one controller that was not permitting parameters. This was not a feature that was built into Rails 3.2. We were including a gem to be able to do it on Rails 3.2. That was built into Rails in 4. And so it looks like we were sometimes inconsistently using it. And now it's built in, so we need to do that everywhere. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to look at the spec again. We're changing it to a scale question. And here's the form for that as minimum and maximum. And options attributes. And then yeah. So a scale question model or rather a question accepts nested attributes for the submittable, I want to make sure, even though we've got the spec green, I want to make sure I understand why it's green. Because if I don't fully understand this, then that could snowball into something else actually being broken and not understanding why. And so that's what I'm thinking through as I make this change. I want to make sure that I'm solving it in the actual right way. And without understanding it, I'm not going to be able to do that. So the question model accepts nested attributes for submittable. And what we have is a scale submittable. That has a minimum and maximum. It has one question. And what we're permitting is minimum, maximum, and options attributes. So what I want to do is I want to see which of I want to make sure that the submittables, the scale submittable does not have any options. But I bet some of the other
Chad, I think Sarah should be hopping on in a couple minutes here, and I'll probably hop off. But I
Cool.
think I did notice that the tuple link that you sent me, it didn't appear that you were in the call. So if she's going to be looking for that, you should make sure you're in that call. Oh, hey, I hear tuple.
I declined you, Sally. I'm in the call now. Thanks for the heads up. Okay, so it's the multiple choice submittable object model that has the options, and it accepts nested attributes for options. This types controller is used for switching between all different types. Hey, Sarah. Thanks for joining me.
Hello, thank you for having me back.
What we're dealing with now looks to be the change from 3.2 to 4.0 of having protected attributes built in. If you remember right, we had this application on Rails 3.2 had pulled in the gem for protected attributes and was using that. We removed that gem because it should no longer be necessary. And what we found was our spec was failing on 4.0. And what we found was the spec was failing, and the questions controller or the types controller was not permitting attributes. It was not permitting attributes. But previously that was okay because that actually wasn't built in to Rails. I looked at the questions controller and it was permitting attributes already. But the failure we had was the types controller was setting attributes that
Yeah.
were protected. So what I did was I added the same permit, minimum, maximum, and options attributes, but the spec was failing on a scale submittable, which I noted did not have options, an attribute called options, and wasn't accepting nested attributes for. So that gave me pause because I didn't want to make a change that I didn't understand what all those attributes were that we were permitting, not only for security reasons, but because I was afraid I was making a change which actually wasn't valid. So I was digging into that. The types controller is used to switch an individual question type to any of the uh, types that questions can be: scalar, multiple choice. What we have is a survey builder. And so I was just tracking down and I looked at the different submittables. Open submittable doesn't have options, but multiple choice submittable does have options attribute.
Ah,
And this controller is used to switch between all of them. So it needs to support the attributes for each of them.
makes sense.
Now, the question is, should we add it there or should we add it down here?
I vote for down here. That's the pattern I tend to see.
Yep.
Aaron said something in the comments. I feel like we're getting marketing ideas from from the stream. Aaron said, I think these streams would be brilliant to edit into some broader lessons for upgrading systems with tests at your back. So much good practice on display, he said, especially about making sure you understand why a test pass. It's easy to move on when you see green and not really follow why things are working. So, yeah, maybe we'll have to edit some of these clips out and share them out. But on that note, I will sign off at least visibly. I'll probably be listening in the background, but holler at me if you need
Cool.
me.
Thank you, Sally. Without you, I was in danger of not making discrete enough Git commits. So,
Oh no.
oh, I'm running on a new Ubuntu system that I just set up with the old version of Ruby, and it looks like my Nano. Ha.
Uh-oh, how do we get out in
Control
Nano?
X. No. Uh, whew, that was close.
We're back.
I
We're
almost
back.
needed to use nano. Okay.
At least it wasn't Emacs, am I right?
Yeah. Okay. Upgrade clearance to 1.x. Okay. Cool. So we have that in its own discrete commit message. Okay. So here we had this permit. So I want to run the specs. We have other failures, Sarah, going on, but this one was like 3 or 4 of our failures. So I know that fixed the one spec where it was happening. Let's see about the others. It's all possible that they were going through the same controller. It's also possible that there's another controller that's not permitting parameters.
Mm.
So I was saying at the beginning, this it's a fully virtualized x86 instance. So it's running, fully emulated x86 instance on ARM. So it's a little bit slower, but it's not bad given the fact that it's fully virtualized.
Yeah.
Emulated rather. Okay, so we definitely have less failures, which is good. That's what we expected. But this is the same error, and it's on a different controller. Define method permit for nil class. That's on the controller we just changed. So that's happening right there. Okay, so that's happening with that, and it's clicking on that. What is the right syntax for this then? This should be require. Is that right?
That looks right. I don't know if you necessarily need to even do the question. I don't know. Haven't worked with. Yeah. Somebody in the comments has it. Yeah, just param.require.permit.
Okay. Cool. So open. So that spec is trying change type open question. It has no submittable attributes. Open question form. Oh. Open submittable form. Has no attributes. It's because it's an open question with no attributes. No additional attributes. So what is the syntax for, you were saying you don't need to change question. Sorry, what were you saying?
Oh, you don't need to specify question, I think. I think it can just be. But maybe.
That, I think that's a change in recent Rails to submit non-nested attributes for the top level thing. So I think you're right now, but it's not right then.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see whether that's the case or not. Okay, so what is the syntax? It's not require, right? Because it's not, if it's optional, it's not there anymore. Yeah, see how this is, it's completely under question. So we need to do that. But that means the syntax would be and then it's permit submittable attributes, permit those things. How do you feel about that? I feel good about that.
Fingers crossed. I don't remember what I did the last time I was in that situation. Nice.
Cool. Yeah, so we're getting into the question, then we're permitting, but it's not required. Submittable attributes, it's optional. Then inside of that, we're permitting the other things. It's a little bit of an edge case to have the forms for different types going through the same controller. So it's not common. It's not super common to have nested attributes be optional. But in this case, this is what's happening. Okay, cool. We did have another failure of forbidden attributes in another controller. Unsubscribes controller. Yeah, that'll do it. So again, previously, what's going on here is previously active record, you would permit mass assignment at the model level. In fact, I think it was probably, if I remember right, like mass assignment was completely prohibited and you would have to opt in to the ones that it was able.
I think I remember seeing that syntax, yeah.
So we need to permit the so it has an email attribute. I'm just going to go to the form and make sure of that. Yeah, so it has an email attribute and nothing else. What do you think? Should we introduce a private protected method to encapsulate? That's a pretty standard pattern, right?
Yeah, I mean, what if somebody wants to put more things in the unsubscribe?
Right, and then you don't need to change it in multiple places. Permit email. That looks right, right? I feel like we should have music playing while the specs are running, especially since they're a little bit slow. Maybe for next time. And then when the specs pass, it can go da-da.
Oh, that would be
And when they
good.
fail, it can automatically go like wah, wah. Okay, we got a pass. So that'd be da-da.
Oh, I have a stream deck. I could set up a soundboard.
I think that might have been all the forbidden attributes things. So let's run them all again and confirm that's the case.
For the rest of my time on the stream, I'm going to be the human soundboard. Should I change my title on StreamYard?
Okay, yeah, Fabio, we're coding on the fly here, and Fabio is pointing out a good thing here. This didn't quite sit with me at the time, and so they're right. The oops. This is how we would probably do it, right? That's the nested syntax instead of calling permit multiple times on on the things. So let's. I just want to finish the other thought about looking for the. Oh, it was. Looks like it ran mid change there.
Would we get like a copyright strike if we had the Jeopardy theme song, Aaron? Admin confirms.
Unknown attributes, immutable attributes. What did I break? Oh. Is this syntax going to return the top level hash? Or is it going to... Because on question, submittable, accepts nested attributes for submittable. We had was working, and this is no longer working, and it's saying unknown attributes, submittable attributes. It's trying to do mass assignment on that, and it's saying that it's not a known attribute. Type are we changing to scale question? Maybe we should put back what we had before if we don't. I really thought that the syntax would work, and it's possible we're just missing something since we're doing it on the fly. If you have any thoughts about what that might be.
I'm going to double check my notes. because I was in this situation with one of our internal projects within the last year or so. I don't remember what I did.
It's possible we just had a typo. I wasn't seeing. Oh, now we put it back. Oh, okay, we have a different failure. Minimum can't be blank. Maximum can't be blank. The fill in steps method should be filling in minimum and maximum. And then when it gets to the controller, it's so this isn't working.
Hmm.
Just so this we didn't rerun. We ran the spec where no attributes were being passed in, and we made that pass with this change. But now we're rerunning all the specs, and the other spec is failing.
Hmm.
So something is up with
Oh, so do you remember what it was that you had in there before when it was like, can you redo it into that format?
It looks like it's not able to be.
Okay.
I can put it back though.
I just have a thought.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an example I see on the internet where they keep the colon at the beginning. They in the example, they keep the colon at the beginning of submittable attributes and the end. Like that, yeah. With the nested array.
Really?
Yeah. And I don't know if that's a typo or I don't know. That's my failure noise.
Unknown attributes, submittable attributes.
Okay.
Is it the nested attributes attribute is submittable attributes, right? Let's go to the Rails guide. And it's also possible that something changed here.
Yeah, time's not on our side.
Okay, I'm not seeing any nested change. Okay, that's not a change. And so Rails 4.0 permit nested attributes.
And we do have the accepts nested attributes for in the model, right?
We do, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Question. Accepts nested attributes submittable.
Can you also print out the
Print out the
params?
params.
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Is this the kind of world where it would care whether it was a symbol or a string? I mean,
Anything
probably
is
not.
possible.
It wasn't complaining about it in the other format? Or actually, this wasn't working before anyway, right? But question is working. So, and question is a string there in that. Hmm.
How would we I really don't think that that's it.
Yeah.
I feel like we have just a obvious error, like typo or something.
Yeah.
It like, should this be a hash? It can't be a hash directly because it's just a list of attributes.
I think it is an array.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like spot the typo.
I just want to try something. So what we're doing is we are trying to set submittable attributes on a question. Wrong number of arguments, 1 for 2. Oh, build submittable. Is that overriding? That's overriding a built-in Rails method.
Dun dun.
Nice. So when I'm doing submittable attributes equals that, it was calling build submittable, which is our own, and it's expecting a type and an attributes.
Mm-hmm. Because there is submittable type and submittable attributes in the params list.
Is it possible that Rails 4.0 added the build underscore methods for I don't want to jump to conclusions, but belongs to how can we find, so here's why I'm saying this.
Mm-hmm.
This overriding a built-in Rails method doesn't seem like something that we would do.
Yeah.
And I just read through all of Ruby Science again, doing a content audit, and I don't remember reading about overriding a Rails method. And the controller is calling build submittable and switch to with the attributes. So it's calling switch to. Which is calling build submittable with the type and the attributes. So this controller doesn't expect build submittable to be called when doing a mass attributes assignment. Can we validate this?
Do I have the ability to highlight comments?
Yeah, you do. You can mouse over the comment and click on show. Does that work for you?
Nope.
Oh,
It's okay. Fabio had a good idea. Use super in the method. If it exists, you'll know.
what do you mean? Like,
Maybe tentatively comment out that the parameters. I don't know. Because it wasn't working right with the parameters.
yeah, but we don't want
Arguments.
we don't want to do that.
Okay.
Let's.
Just as an experiment.
Wrong number of arguments, 1 for 2.
Yeah, because there's still the arguments on line 35.
Yeah.
I don't know how many would have normally if it was the Rails version.
Just one, I believe. Just a hash, I believe.
Okay.
Okay. So no superclass method build submittable for question.
So we're probably not overriding a Rails internal API.
But isn't there a build submit for belongs to? Isn't there? It would be here. So there's a build survey method on question, but not a build submittable method. Is it because it's polymorphic? Okay, I don't want to go down a incorrect rabbit hole here. Let's take a step back and so that we hit this thing not when I was checking to see whether question. Okay, so that's commented, not commented anymore, and now that method is there. Rails is adding a build survey method. For the belongs to for survey, unless yeah. Okay, and so wrong number of arguments 1 for 2. So what is calling build submittable then? It's coming from inside here. So this is Rails code. So build association name. If it has that method, then send that method with the attributes, with a single hash of the attributes. So we need to determine whether our application is defining build method because that's a logical name for it and it didn't exist in Rails before. And this functionality didn't exist in Rails before.
Mm-hmm.
And now it does, and it just happens to be calling a method that we named it.
I'm diving into some code.
That's my hunch. I suspect that these methods to build belongs to didn't exist previously, and now they do, and our naming is conflicting with it. That's my hunch. And it's there in Rails 4 for a regular belongs to, but because it's polymorphic, it's not there for the other one.
Mm-hmm.
How can we confirm that? Did you say you're looking at something?
Yeah, I'm in the Rails source code on GitHub.
Rails. Build for belongs to.
I think it's called Build Other on Active Record Associations.
Okay, so.
Or Build Association.
Yeah, and now, but this is for the current Rails guide, so let's. Actually, we want to go back to. This isn't a full active record guide. I have a wild idea. This is amazing to me.
Oh, yeah?
So this is the first book I wrote. It's called Pro Active Record. It is a complete, there's an index of every single active record method.
Wait, which version?
That's what I'm looking at. It can't be Rails 3 because there's no way. Can you look? Well, it is not here. It is not in this book.
Okay.
And this includes a complete appendix of all active record methods. So that means it was added at some point. It was not originally a feature to be able to do build underscore the association name. Just confirm. Yeah, it's not there. It's remarkable how few methods there were in that index in Rails 2. Okay, so that means that in Rails, and it's not mentioned in this 3.2. See, this is not a full Rails guide, though. This is just a sort of an upgrading guide.
Yeah.
Rails 4.0 build association. That's what that's what we're looking for. We're looking for API doc. That's what we want.
Yeah, where you can go back through the versions.
Okay, so it was added in 2.2. So it says that it was. Okay, let's continue to so this is telling us that, what is this telling us? This is telling us that see, it's called build association, but what we're actually, that's what the docs called them. We need to verify whether the dynamic method was there or not.
Yeah. Trying to.
Okay, so
This is a fun rabbit hole, though.
Okay. So here's the Rails 3.2 version of this method.
So it was there.
It was, but it is a little bit different. When it sends, it does assignable attributes. And this is 4.2. This is 4.0. It does method assignable attributes. In this, in 3.2, it passes 2 attributes. See?
And now in 4, it passes 1.
Just the assignable attributes. So the first things that it passed
was the type. It said.
Oh, in our method.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what is it? What is this? Attributes except unassignable keys.
Oh.
So in Rails 3.2, all attributes were, in order to specify which ones were mass assignable, you specified it on the model.
Okay.
And so what this is doing is it's taking and making it so that you can't mass assign the unassignable attributes. It's removing them from the attributes hash.
Mhm.
And then it has a second attribute, which is assignment options. I don't know what that is. It's a third attribute to that. In Rails 4, there's no third attribute to that method either. This is a pretty big change in terms of how we were in our application. I feel like we've made we just uncovered what the I need to remind myself that we sort of just figured out what was going on, which is good, but it's a bigger change than I realized. This is not just some trivial change.
But we do you think that this kind of name conflict, this kind of would you say that build submittable was written as a monkey patch?
So it's not a monkey patch,
because it's not like opening up,
right? And the so I want to look. We should look. But here's what I am beginning to suspect. This is written so that maybe the class doesn't respond to build. So, hey, you want to customize how the assignment building or the association building works? You could define
your
build
own.
submittal.
Okay.
That's what that reads to me like. So I think that's what we're doing there.
Do you think that would be a common thing to see in other projects from this time?
It's a good question.
Because if so, I want to remember it for next time I'm doing an upgrade.
So jumping forward to Rails 6.1, it was still conditional, still checking whether the method existed and still sending it for a one-to-one association. So it's not like this was something that you could only do then and not anymore.
The only difference is, I guess, we were relying on being able to send two fields as opposed to maybe one hash, two arguments.
Yeah, I'm just going to go over to the book itself and I'm going to Okay, so even though I just read through everything, it was apparently too much to hold in my brain and forgot that. Okay, so let's actually introduce a polymorphic solution. Now that our strategies are persistible. Okay, so it is defining a build submittable method. That's what we're expecting. So the question on my mind is, again, did we name this method build submittable because we knew that it was overriding, or because it was a hook that Rails provided?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it a coincidence?
287.
We're currently defining submittable method that overrides the association. Let's change that to a method that will build the association based on the STI type. So that to me reads as though we're doing it as though it's being done intentionally. Is that how you read it?
Yeah, that's the sense that I got.
Okay. Awesome. You need to go, right, Sarah?
I do. Do you have anyone else joining you?
No, but I'm going to close out the hour. Let's take so let's everyone say goodbye to Sarah. Sarah's you're going on vacation, right?
Yeah, I'm going to Japan.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
Yeah, and if you're around at RubyConf in November, I'll be bringing Kit Kats. So
Amazing. Sarah, thank you as always. We're going to be back on, we're going to continue. We're going to take a 5-minute break now. We're going to be back on after the break. And then we're also going to be back on tomorrow, same time, 2 p.m. US Eastern as well. So let's take a 5-minute break. Thank you again, Sarah. And I'll be back in 5.
thanks for having me. See y'all, everyone.
Okay. We're back, or I'm back. So we just determined that a couple things, that this is entirely intentional. I think you could argue whether we want to keep on hooking in to this Rails hook in this way, but changing the way the overall approach is beyond the scope of the work that we're doing right now. So the other thing that we verified is that between Rails 3 in Rails 3.2, this method sent two things, and now in Rails 4.0, it only sends the hash of assignable attributes. And so the weird thing in my mind is still that we're expecting this first attribute here to be the type and then the attributes, which is not how that API is doing things. How is it getting the type before? Actually, let's reread this. Okay, actually, I think maybe we previously the submittable method built the submittable on demand, but now it's persisted in an association and built explicitly. Let's jump over to so in the source of the book, we have this syntax for pulling code, example code out of Git at a specific change. It's really handy for being able to show changes along the way. But it means that the code's not included in the source. We need to go to the built version of this. And we can do that here. So yeah, okay. So previously the submittable method built the submittable on demand, but now it's persisted in association and built explicitly. Let's change our controllers accordingly. It's explicitly calling build submittable here. So now I'm back to thinking that this application code doesn't expect it to be called in the same way. Next one with the validations. Okay. Okay, so here's the change. Pass the type when instantiating the strategy. At this point, the subclasses are just dead weight. However, we can't delete them just yet. We're relying on the type column to decide what type of strategy to build, and Rails will complain if we have a type column without corresponding subclasses. Let's remove our dependence on that type column, accept a type when building the submittable, and pass it when calling build submittable. We're still relying on type as a parameter in forms and links to decide what type of submittable to build. Let's change that to submittable type, which is already available because of our polymorphic association. That's correct. So he says, it's nice to have this book which thoroughly documents why the application is doing what it's doing. Uh, it's a rare be-in where you hit a change like this in an application level, and you can actually go and view the the thinking behind it and how it got that way in such detail. Okay, so this is calling the build submittable method. I pointed this out when we, at some point, the controller is calling switch2 and giving it specifically the submittable attributes. And here it's explicitly calling build submittable. It is not doing it is not doing nested attributes assignment in this controller. The controller is not expecting that to happen. It is calling switch2, which explicitly calls build submittable with the type. That leads me back to the hunch that we weren't expecting originally this method. Oh, wait. This controller is not doing mass assignment. The error we're getting is submittable attributes is not an attribute. It was never doing mass assignment before. So the fact that when we do mass assignment, it gets this error is potentially not not a concern, because nothing's actually doing mass assignment. It is explicitly calling build submittable. What this is supposed to be is a hash of just the submittables attributes, which we know is minimum, maximum, and the options attributes. It is raising an unknown attributes error, because submittable attributes is not an attribute. It is a nested assignment method. But permit is checking. Isn't that a Rails feature? Raise on unknown assignments. I think it might be. Let's verify that. Rails raise on unknown assignment attribute. Yeah, I knew that sounded familiar. Don't know whether this rename unpermitted. It's different than unknown. The moment active model attribute assignment raises an unknown attribute error if an unknown attribute is provided when using assign attributes. This provides safety but is not really flexible. Okay. So I think, so what we had originally here was, let's look at the diff. Let's go to the diff. We were just pulling out the, okay. And if you remember, what I originally did was called permit up here with the 3 attributes. And then we decided, well, we should move it down here because that's, you know, where it makes sense. But this is different than that. What this is doing is requiring question, permitting that, and it is returning. It's not digging into the hash. It's returning the whole thing defined there, right? So this is different than that. These are not the same. What would be the same is would be the same. What would be the same? So we need to account, what I want to do is so we're back to this now. And how that was failing is in the case where there are no submittable attributes, it returns nil. And so nil did not respond to permit. My concern is I don't know that hash is going to respond to permit either. So what I would normally do would be like that to account for that. This doesn't seem right. But let's run the spec and here's the spec. So I think we're on the right track. As Fabio says, we were returning the whole hash there, and it's not what we want. And now we're not returning the right thing. So this syntax, I want to just double check something. Just want to double check. Oops. Yeah, so Fabio is putting this. Thank you, Fabio. Yeah, so requiring the question. Well, it is. Yep, and then fetching or falling. So we want to permit the submittable. Okay, so we're back to this. We're permitting the submittable attributes, and then we want to, out of this, we want to fetch submittable attributes. And if there are none, then we want to go return an empty hash. This might actually be it. Thank you, Fabio. Moment of truth. Looks like we had a infinite loop there. Nice. Oh, I'm missing the symbol. I was calling the submittable attributes method over and over again. Nice. Okay, so let's run all the specs in this file, confirm that they're all passing. Remember, we had one pass before, another one didn't. The case where nothing was coming through passed, and then the case where other things were coming through failed, if I remember right. So, okay. Okay. So the ones where things are coming through is passing. The ones where there are no attributes is failing with the forbidden attributes. error. That's I remember that question includes forbidden attributes protection, which Rails documented as a way to automatically prevent mass assignment on everything. I'm really just not sure that we need that anymore. I'm hesitant to remove it though, because it seems yeah, so we removed the strong parameters gem, allowing new this. Yeah. So Rails by default excludes, am I right about this? These things are so basic sometimes, and yet we take them for granted. And so when we ask the question, we can throw ourselves for a loop. Does Rails automatically prevent mass assignment on all attributes by default? I think the answer to that question is yes. And so see, we're merging in question here. So is it throwing this forbidden attribute because of question being merged in? I think that might be what's happening. So we're doing mass attribute assignment. In this case, we have a hash that has been built, but we're merging in something. It's weird to call permit in the model. So what I'm going to do is change this to not use mass assignment. So let's look at submittable class. In this case, so we're constantizing based on the type. Okay. So if we change this to make, we don't want to do it in that order. What I'm going to change it to is making the object and then setting question on the object to self. Instead of merging it into the attributes, which is giving the forbidden attributes error. We just have to do it. Build submittable should return currently returns the submittable, so I want to maintain that. I want to maintain that order so it keeps on doing that. So submittable. We can clean this up. I'm just gonna do it a little dirty and see whether that actually fixes the problem. So we're gonna make it with just the attributes, and then we're gonna say submittable object dot question equals self, and then we'll set the. So now we're no longer doing mass assignment on that. Let's verify that that exception goes away and that the specs pass. Nice. Okay. I'm going to run the whole file just while we go back and clean this up a bit. I don't actually know that returning the submittable is necessary, but it really seems like something I want to maintain. Good. So all the specs pass. So now we just need to do this a little bit differently. I don't know how people feel about this, but we could do this. Oh, wait. Self is going to be. Will self be? Okay, let's take a close look at that. Make sure that how do we feel about that? I don't know who's watching or not, but how do we feel about that? It's interesting. While we think about that, I'm going to run all the specs. Yeah, so Dave says, not sure about the pattern, about setting submittable on the class, but it's what you got. I think that's right, Dave. I think part of what might be going on here is that, changes in behavior in Rails. Rails app started off with one thing, and the things that associations did for you automatically change over time because, so I just want to look at the errors here. Cool. So we're not introducing any further errors. We've reduced our errors. I mean, these are still green. So another way that we yeah. Okay. So I think for now we'll leave this like this, because we really got pretty far down in the weeds on this. But at this point, we've resolved one class of failures that we had. And the class of failures that we had was the mass assignment changes from Rails 3.2 to 4.0. And we now no longer, as far as I can tell, have any failures. Yeah, and Fabio is saying avoiding nested attributes. I agree. I totally agree. I think Thoughtbot in general agrees, but I think that has been an opinion that has emerged over time and probably wasn't as strongly the case 10 years ago. And so totally it is a little bit out of scope for the changes we're making now, which is upgrading the application. But I don't think it's out of scope for the overall project that we're working on now, which is to update Ruby science. And I think asking the question as we do that, would we still use nested attributes for this today? Is probably no. And so we'll add that to the list of things that we need to look at. But for now, I think we've solved the batch of errors that we were getting. So I'm going to look at this. And I'm going to commit that. So okay. So let's see if we can pick off at least one more error here in the last 25 minutes. Here's all our failures. We're down to 13. Looks like these three are all the same failure, so that's attractive, but let's look at the other. There's this can't convert nil to float on sprintf call. That's happening twice, and then we have 3 times, and we have those things that we took a crack at right at the beginning of the session, but we couldn't do that. We couldn't figure it out. So nil to float, can't convert nil into float is happening 4 times. So let's see if we can figure that one out. The spec. Okay, it's just calling submit answers. So it's submitting the answer form. We go all the way to there. Okay, so answers average text is returning nil now. So answers is question.answers, which is an association. So let's just confirm that. Yeah, it has many answers. So, and answers have a text attribute. Have that text attribute. It's calling average. I mean, my instinct is that that's the Rails average calculation method, which you give a column name, and it says it returns nil if there's no row. And text is a text column. So what would calling the average of a text column give? That's interesting. Returns nil if there's no row. It's different than Okay. Let's. Okay. So this is generating a text summary of the answers to the survey question. And it is, I'm just going back to the spec, submit answers. So we're choosing 10 here as the answer. Taking the average of that text column. Okay, so view survey with question. I'm pretty sure that that method is a spec helper to build a survey. Yep, build a survey with particular questions. And then, so what the spec is doing is it's setting up a question, survey with a question, minimum, maximum values from 0 to 10. Then the person is logging on and choosing 10, submitting their answer. And so what we expect to get there is 10. So the spec is telling me that what we're expecting that average to get is 10, and it's not there. And the fact that it returns nil, it returns nil if there are no rows, leads me to believe that our answer is not actually saving, which I noticed a spec here. You haven't answered the question. So some other specs are failing around questions being answered. And so Dave says, sounds like maybe a missing setup in the factory. Yeah, that could be. Sounds like maybe a missing setup in the factory. Let's just look at that factory again. View survey question. No, we're not. It is setting up the survey and the question. The spec itself should be answering the question. The factory shouldn't be setting it up. So let's click on submit answers. Okay, cool. So what I don't know is just gonna tail the logs here. What I don't know is what controller this is actually exercising. So I'm going to run the specs with tailing the test log, and so that I can try to see that. Okay, so it's getting the survey, going to survey show, and it's submitting a survey completion, a completion. You can see answer attributes is coming through as 10, the text, so that's fine. Completions is being created. But unpermitted parameters answers attributes. Cool. So the log shows us that the completions controller isn't permitting the answers attributes. I thought we resolved all the mass assignment errors, but it turns out this spec failure is also a mass assignment thing. Okay, it's being permitted right there. Let me just zoom in for, make this a little bigger. Now I lost it. Here it is, up here. Nope. Okay. So on the post to the completions controller, answers attributes unpermitted. Okay, let's go back to our controller. Looks to me require completion, answers attributes, so if I remember right, so I'm a little hesitant to change this code too much. I would totally extract this to a completion params method. What I don't know is whether that's a point made in the book, so I don't want to change that just yet. So we're going to stay up here and modifying it in line. But if I remember right, this syntax, isn't it? Oh, no, I don't want to keep that a symbol. But you need to tell you need to tell, yeah, you need to tell it that it is a hash. So in this case, it's not here. So that is what we want, I believe. So this is the case again where we were pulling in the strong parameters gem, but then when it was integrated into Rails, the syntax probably changed a little bit. Okay. Okay, so that's a little bit of progress. What's happening is answers.text is nil, and it is not allowed to be, null, false. So let's go to the spec. We are submitting an answer. And the log did have completion, answers attributes, and it's a hash. I suspect now, yeah, unpermitted parameter text. So this syntax here is this, I believe. So it's, talking out loud, it occurs to me, I was never up. We've been at this for 5.5 hours now, six and a half hours now over those 2 days. I never had to tail the logs before, but now I'm tailing the logs and it's giving me actual information relevant to this problem that we're having. And so, this is the kind of thing, and I'm going to put in a plug, like experience matters. Oftentimes with this kind of thing, you're also going off of like a feeling, right? So I don't know why I said suddenly we should tail the logs. It just occurred to me. So that's passing because we permitted the text parameter and we've got the right syntax now. So anyway, I'm going to put in a plug. Thoughtbot does Rails maintenance, upgrades, making new Rails apps. So if you want to work with us on these kinds of things, you can just visit thoughtbot.com/hire-us, thoughtbot.com, click on the link right at the top. It's going to take you there. We've got, I'm not the only developer. We've got a whole bunch of really experienced people who can lend their attention to these kinds of problems. Dave asked, do you lean on pry for errors? Pry, I'll be honest, isn't really part of my workflow. I feel like it probably should be more. I have to admit, oftentimes I'm doing puts debugging rather than leaning on pry, but it's probably something that I could improve at and integrate into my workflow more. So let's run the whole spec file. Oh, the whole spec file was only that spec. So let's run. So if you remember, right, we had a couple of failures around that nil conversion into a float. So, and that was caused by the unpermitted parameter. So I suspect that we're going to get less failures this time. It's good to know I'm not alone, Fabio. And okay, so wrapping up or hurtling towards the end of the stream here. I've really enjoyed this. This is, like I said at the beginning, this is work I'm actually doing anyway. So it's really valuable to put it up, and I hope people are getting things out of it. Wow, we went from 13 failures to only 4 failures. That is more progress than I was expecting from that individual fix. Must have been a lot of specs around submitting a survey answer. And so my point being is this is only our second live stream around coding that we're doing at Thoughtbot. I plan on continuing this, and there's a whole bunch of other people that are interested as well. So, we're going to do feature development, open source development. I'm going to continue this. Right now, I'm working on this today and tomorrow. So I'm going to be streaming again 2 p.m. Eastern tomorrow with this. My goal is to wrap up this work, if not tomorrow, which is seeming optimistic at this point, soon. And it's possible that we'll start streaming on other topics. So if you've got ideas so the things that we will be doing is live streaming actual development of features in an application. That's what I'm going to be working on next week. And so there'll be some streams about that. And then people who have been contributing to Rails and to other open source projects like Turbo, Sean Doyle, if you know, is really interested in streaming some of his work. And so these are the kinds of things that we're going to be doing. And so keep an eye on the stream as we progress. And if you have suggestions for things that you'd like to see, people working on FactoryBot, these kinds of things. And again, our work with clients makes this possible. So if you or your company has a need, we do complete Rails development, maintenance, mobile application development and maintenance of greenfield and legacy applications. And we have part-time support people available. So monthly maintenance retainer contracts are possible as well. And we appreciate all the support that everyone gives. So I think I'm going to commit this change. We're back to 2 failures being the email validation failure and then a record not found, which is, if I had to guess, probably another attributes assignment error. But let's commit this and then we'll wrap up for the day. Commit, so fix mass assignment on completion. Awesome. So we're down to just those 4 failures. I think that's it for today. And I appreciate everybody. Stay tuned. Tomorrow we'll be back on, like I said, from 2 to 5 US Eastern. We're going to be, and then next week, I can already say, I definitely know there's going to be a stream in the morning time US Eastern, which will hopefully be a little bit better for some of our team members in Europe, the Middle East, or Africa to join me on the stream as well. So thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day and see you tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Fabio, for the help. Thank you, Dave, Fabio, for all the help. Thanks for everyone who helped all throughout. It was helpful, especially since for portions of the day it was just me, so it was helpful to have somebody pointing out the obvious things that I was missing and helping with syntax.